The moment you stop reacting, you become dangerous. Most people think power comes from speaking louder, explaining more, or proving themselves. Machiavelli taught the opposite. Real power is silence. Today, you'll learn why ignoring people is not weakness. It's psychological dominance. Most people don't lose power because they are weak. They lose power because they give too much access. In psychology, value is never created by availability. Value is created by scarcity. And ignoring people, when done correctly, is one of the most powerful ways to manufacture scarcity without saying a single word. Machiavelli understood this long before modern psychology existed. He observed something uncomfortable but true. People desire what resists them. The human brain is wired to chase what it cannot easily obtain. The moment something becomes predictable, accessible, or guaranteed, the brain downgrades its value. This is why ignoring works. Why attention lowers your value. Let's break this down psychologically. When you reply instantly, always explain yourself, always show up emotionally, always seek closure, you communicate one thing subconsciously: I am available, I am invested, I am dependent, and the brain translates dependency as low status. High status individuals don't chase attention, they decide where attention goes. Ignoring people flips this dynamic completely. Now you are the variable. Now you are unpredictable. Now you are scarce. And scarcity triggers obsession. The scarcity, fefte, core psychology. In behavioral psychology, there's a principle called the scarcity effect. Anything that feels limited, feels more valuable, feels more important, feels harder to replace. When you ignore someone, you remove certainty, you introduce doubt, you force the other person to fill the silence. And here's the key: the human mind hates unanswered questions. Silence creates a psychological vacuum, and people rush to fill that vacuum with thoughts about you, not because you begged for attention, but because you withdrew it. Why explaining yourself kills attraction. Most people think being understood increases respect. In reality, over-explaining lowers perceived value. Why? Because explanation implies you need approval, you fear misinterpretation, you want to be accepted. Machiavellian psychology operates on the opposite rule. Never rush to clarify your position. When you ignore instead of explaining, you appear self-assured. You signal emotional independence, you force others to reassess your importance. Silence doesn't beg to be understood. Silence demands interpretation, and interpretation creates power. Ignoring rems the power, styrchashesh. Every interaction has a hidden hierarchy. One person reacts, the other observes. The reactor is chasing. The observer is choosing. The observer is choosing. When you ignore, you step out of the reactive role. You noob up the hierarchy. Now the other person starts wondering, did I say something wrong? Did I lose access? Why doesn't this affect them? And the moment someone starts questioning their position relative to you, you've gained leverage. Most people use ignoring wrong. Let's be clear. Ignoring is not ghosting out of fear, silent treatment from insecurity, running away from conflict. That's weakness disguised as strategy. True ignoring comes from abundance, not avoidance. You're not silent because you're hurt. You're silent because you don't need to engage. Machiavelli would say, withdraw attention only when your presence is being taken for granted. That's when ignoring creates value. The brain's response to being ignored. Here's what happens neurologically. When someone loses access to your attention, dopamine levels fluctuate, anxiety increases, curiosity spikes. Their brain starts replaying interactions, reevaluating tone, searching for meaning. Meanwhile, you did nothing. This asymmetry is power. One mind is busy, the other is calm, and calm always dominates chaos. Why high-value people are hard to reach. Think about the people you respect the most. They're not always available. They don't respond instantly. They don't explain themselves to everyone. That distance is not arrogance. It's structure. Ignoring builds a psychological wall, not to isolate, but to filter. Only those who respect boundaries remain. Everyone else reveals their insecurity. Machiavellian rule of value. Machiavelli never advised constant engagement. He advised controlled visibility. Be present, but not predictable. Be seen, but not accessible. Be silent, but intentional. Ignoring works because it sends one dominant message: my attention is earned, not assumed. And once people realize your attention has value, they treat you like you have value. Most people think power comes from money, looks, or influence. In reality, power comes from where attention flows. Every social interaction is a transaction. Someone gives attention, someone receives it, and the one who controls attention controls the outcome. Attention is not emotional. Attention is economic. It has supply. It has demand. And like any currency, when you give it away cheaply, it loses value. High-status individuals understand one brutal truth: what you focus on defines your position in the hierarchy. From a psychological perspective, attention signals importance. When you consistently focus on someone, you elevate them. You validate their behavior. You give them leverage over your emotions. Your brain is unconsciously telling them, you matter more than I do in this moment. This is why people who crave power don't raise their voice. They don't argue. They don't overreact. They reallocate attention. The human nervous system is wired to monitor. Attention shifts. When attention is present, the brain relaxes. When attention is withdrawn, the brain panics. Why? Because attention equals safety, relevance, and status. When someone loses your attention, their mind asks, did I lose importance? Am I no longer valued? What changed in the power balance? This internal questioning creates psychological pressure, and pressure creates compliance. This is why reacting emotionally is expensive. Every time you defend yourself, unnecessarily argue to be understood, explain your intentions to people who don't respect you, you are spending attention on low-return investments. You are inflating others at your own expense. Powerful individuals don't eliminate emotion. They control distribution. They decide who gets access, who gets response, who gets silence. And silence is the most valuable currency of all. Modern psychology confirms this through reinforcement theory. Behavior that receives attention is reinforced. Behavior that receives attention is reinforced. Behavior that receives none either adapts or disappears. When you reward disrespect with reaction, it grows. When you starve it of attention, it collapses. This is why attention discipline reshapes social dynamics without confrontation. You don't need to dominate verbally. You dominate structurally. There is a reason confident people appear calm. It's not because they feel nothing. It's because they don't leak attention. They don't rush to check messages. They don't chase validation. They don't center themselves around others' moods. Their internal rule is simple. My focus is valuable. It must be earned. That rule alone changes how people treat you. The average person reacts first and thinks later. High-level individuals think first and react last, if at all. Reaction places you in a subordinate position. Observation places you in a dominant one. When you observe, you collect data. You maintain control. You stay unpredictable. Unpredictability increases perceived power. The brain respects what it cannot easily read. Another critical point: attention creates emotional dependency. When someone knows they can always get a reaction from you, they feel safe controlling you. When reactions disappear, control disappears. This is why ignoring strategic moments creates tension, not distance. Distance reduces interest. Tension increases it. And tension is where power lives. People often misunderstand this and assume attention control is cold or arrogant. It's neither. It's self-regulation. You are not removing attention to punish. You are removing attention to rebalance, to remind the system, I am not a resource you consume freely. This subtle shift forces others to recalibrate how they engage with you. Neuroscience explains this through dopamine loops. Unpredictable rewards create stronger attachment than constant ones. When attention is guaranteed, dopamine flattens. When attention is uncertain, dopamine spikes. This is why people obsess over those who are hard to reach. Not because they are cruel, but because they are scarce. Scarcity drives value. Think about leadership. Leaders don't attend every argument. They don't comment on every opinion. They don't explain every decision. They let silence do the filtering. Only relevant information reaches them. Only respectful engagement survives. Everyone else fades out. That's not ego. That's efficiency. Social dominance is not about being seen everywhere. It's about being felt even when absent. When your attention is missed, your value is proven. If your absence changes nothing, your presence meant little. That's the uncomfortable metric most people avoid. The moment you stop feeding every interaction, you gain leverage. The moment you stop reacting to provocation, you gain authority. The moment you choose where your attention goes, others follow. Because attention doesn't just reflect power, attention creates it. Those who understand this don't beg to be noticed. They decide who is worth noticing. And in every hierarchy, social, professional, emotional, the one who controls attention sets the rules. Most people never really know who is sincere and who is opportunistic. Not because the truth is hidden, but because they never create the conditions for the truth to surface. Ignoring does that. When you remove your reactions, explanations, and emotional availability, people reveal themselves without realizing it. This is not theory. This is observable human behavior rooted in psychology, social conditioning, and power dynamics. Human beings adjust their behavior based on what they get in return. Attention, validation, access, emotional engagement. When those rewards disappear, intention becomes visible. At a surface level, most people appear respectful, supportive, and interested. But surface behavior is cheap. It costs nothing to be polite when incentives exist. The real test begins when incentives are removed, when you stop replying quickly, when you stop initiating, when you stop explaining yourself, when you stop explaining yourself, when you stop emotionally feeding the interaction. That silence creates psychological pressure, and under pressure, people don't become fake, they become honest. The human ego hates uncertainty. When someone is used to your availability and suddenly loses it, their mind enters a diagnostic mode. They begin searching for explanations, not for your well-being, but for their position. Their internal questions are never, are they okay? They are, did I lose control? Did I lose importance? Why am I not being prioritized? Those questions expose motivation. Someone who valued you as a person will respond with respect, patience, and adjustment. Someone who valued you as a resource will respond with irritation, manipulation, or withdrawal. Ignoring doesn't create these traits, it uncovers them. In social psychology, this is tied to something called contingent regard. Contingent regard means someone treats you well only when you meet their emotional, social, or psychological needs. As long as you respond, validate, support, entertain, reassure, they stay pleasant. But when you stop supplying those things, the mask slips. That is not coincidence. That is dependency being exposed. People with genuine intentions don't panic when access is reduced. They adapt. They respect boundaries. They give space. They don't escalate. They don't escalate. They don't guilt. They don't test. They assume autonomy, because their interest was not rooted in control. On the other hand, people with hidden agendas react very differently. They escalate communication. They demand explanations. They create drama. They attempt emotional leverage. They accuse you of changing. They frame your silence as wrongdoing. Why? Because ignoring removes their advantage. And when advantage is threatened, true motives surface. This is why silence is so disruptive. It removes the stage. Manipulative personalities require engagement to operate. They need dialogue to reframe reality. They need reactions to steer emotions. They need responses to maintain influence. Ignoring collapses their strategy. Without resistance, they have nothing to push against. Without reaction, they have nothing to feed on. What remains is frustration, and frustration reveals intent. Pay close attention to how people react when you stop giving attention. Not what they say, but what they do. Do they respect the pause, or do they try to invade it? Do they become calm or controlling? Do they reflect or retaliate? Behavior under silence is more honest than words under conversation. Another important psychological effect of ignoring is role reversal. Normally, the person who explains is in the lower position. The person who listens is in the higher one. When you stop explaining, the roles flip. Now the other person feels evaluated. Now they feel uncertain. Now they feel the need to re-earn position. This role shift is uncomfortable for anyone who relied on dominance or entitlement, and discomfort exposes entitlement faster than confrontation ever could. Most people don't walk away when disrespected. They argue, they explain, they defend, they hope to be understood. That keeps disrespect alive. Ignoring, on the other hand, removes the reward. Disrespect without reaction dies quickly. Manipulation without engagement collapses. Drama without audience evaporates. What survives is sincerity. Ignoring also tests emotional maturity. Emotionally mature people understand that not everything is about them. They don't personalize silence. They don't assume malice. They don't demand access. Emotionally immature people cannot tolerate ambiguity. They need constant reassurance. They need immediate feedback. They need to be centered. Silence destabilizes them. And again, this is not caused by ignoring. It is revealed by it. There is a reason experienced leaders speak less, not more. They observe reactions to absence. They watch who steps up. They see who panics. They notice who adapts. Silence becomes a diagnostic tool. Who respects structure? Who respects authority? Who respects autonomy? Who respects autonomy? The answers emerge naturally. In relationships, this principle is even more powerful. When you stop overgiving, over-explaining, and over-investing, the dynamic clarifies. Some people increase effort. Some people disappear. Some people attack. Some people apologize. Some people expose resentment. Every response is data, and data is power. Many people fear ignoring because they believe it will push people away. That fear reveals something important. It means the relationship was held together by your effort, not mutual respect. Anything that survives only through your constant input was never stable to begin with. Ignoring doesn't destroy real connections. It destroys illusions. Psychologically, silence activates projection. When people don't know your thoughts, they project their own insecurities onto you. The guilty, project guilt. The controlling, project defiance. The insecure, project abandonment. The manipulative, project cruelty. They accuse you of what they fear being, and in doing so, they confess their internal state. This is why ignoring must be intentional, not emotional. You are not silent to punish. You are silent to observe. You are creating space for reality to surface. And reality always surfaces when performance ends. Notice something critical here. People who truly respect you don't need constant access to prove their worth. They don't rush. They don't demand. They don't pressure. They understand that mutual respect includes independence. People who rely on control cannot tolerate that independence, and control, once exposed, can no longer pretend to be care. Ignoring also strips away false urgency. Manipulators create urgency to bypass your reasoning. They want immediate responses, immediate decisions, immediate reassurance. Silence neutralizes urgency, and when urgency fails, manipulation becomes obvious. What remains is either patience or aggression. Both are revealing. One of the hardest lessons in power psychology is this: you don't find out who someone is by engaging more with them. You find out by engaging less. Words are curated. Reactions are instinctive. Instinct never lies. This is why ignoring is feared by those with something to hide. It removes their ability to manage impressions. It prevents narrative control. It blocks emotional steering. They cannot perform without feedback, so they escalate. And escalation is confession. At a deeper level, ignoring restores your internal hierarchy. Instead of organizing your behavior around others' expectations, you recentralize around your values, time, and focus. That shift alone filters your environment. Those who belong remain aligned. Those who belong remain aligned. Those who benefited from imbalance fall away. Ignoring is not abandonment. It is non-participation in disrespect. It is choosing not to negotiate your boundaries. It is refusing to reward behavior that costs you peace, dignity, or leverage. When you ignore, you don't become invisible. You become defined. People know where you stand without you saying a word. Your silence becomes a boundary. Your absence becomes a feedback. Your restraint becomes authority. Over time, something interesting happens. People stop testing you. They stop pushing. They stop provoking. Because they learn a psychological rule: you don't react emotionally. You don't overinvest. You don't explain yourself into submission. That reputation is powerful. The final truth is this: ignoring is not about others. It is about information. It shows you who respects you, who needs you, who uses you, who resents you, who values access over connection. And once you see that clearly, you no longer need to guess. You choose. Silence didn't distance you from the truth. It delivered it. Most people believe dominance is loud. They associate power with aggression, intensity, and emotional display. Psychology proves the opposite. True dominance is emotional control. Not the absence of emotion, but mastery over it. The individual who can feel anger, pressure, disrespect, or temptation without reacting impulsively always holds the upper position in any interaction. Because reactions are readable. Control is intimidating. Human beings constantly scan for emotional cues: tone, timing, facial expression, response speed. From these cues, the brain determines who is stable, who is reactive, who can be influenced, who cannot. The moment someone realizes they can influence your emotional state, they gain leverage. The moment they realize they can't, dominance shifts. Emotional reactions are information leaks. Anger reveals vulnerability. Defensiveness reveals insecurity. Over-explaining reveals fear of misjudgment. Silence reveals self-trust. Every visible reaction gives others data, and data is control. Most people don't lose arguments because they are wrong. They lose because they react. The nervous system floods. The voice changes. The tempo increases. The focus narrows. At that moment, logic shuts down. The other person doesn't need to overpower you intellectually. They just wait. Time favors the calm. Neuroscience explains this clearly. When emotions spike, the amygdala takes over. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for reasoning and judgment, goes offline. This is why people say things they regret. This is why they give away leverage. This is why they reveal too much. Emotional control keeps the prefrontal cortex active. Calm equals clarity. Clarity equals dominance. High-level individuals are dangerous not because they are aggressive, but because they are unmovable. Provocation doesn't speed them up. Disrespect doesn't destabilize them. Pressure doesn't rush them. They absorb stimulus without reaction. That capacity alone elevates them in every hierarchy. Notice how emotionally reactive people behave. They argue to win, defend to survive, explain to be accepted, escalate to feel powerful. But escalation is always a sign of losing control. Dominance does not need escalation. Dominance is quiet. In social dynamics, the one who reacts first is usually the one who loses position. Reaction signals importance. It says, "This affected me." Non-reaction creates ambiguity. Ambiguity creates unease, and unease shifts power. This is why emotional discipline terrifies manipulators. Manipulation depends on predictable reactions. Guilt requires guilt responses. Anger requires anger engagement. Fear requires fear compliance. When reactions stop matching expectations, manipulation collapses. A calm nervous system breaks the manipulator's script. Emotional control also prevents unnecessary conflict. Most conflicts don't start from disagreement, they start from mismanaged emotion. A pause, a delay, a measured response. These things de-escalate situations before they turn adversarial. And those who can de-escalate are perceived as leaders. Leadership psychology consistently shows this pattern. People trust those who are stable under pressure. They follow those who remain composed. They defer to those who don't panic. Panic is contagious. Calm is authoritative. Another overlap of truth. Emotional control protects your reputation. Outbursts are remembered longer than achievements. Reactions are replayed more than results. People may forget what you said. They will never forget how you reacted. And memory shapes hierarchy. Emotionally controlled individuals are also harder to manipulate because they don't confuse emotion with truth. They observe first. They verify. They decide. They don't let tone override logic. They don't let urgency override judgment. They don't let ego override strategy. This doesn't mean suppressing emotion. Suppression creates pressure. Pressure eventually explodes. Control means processing internally and responding intentionally. You still feel. You just don't broadcast. The most powerful people are internally intense and externally calm. They feel deeply. They think slowly. They act precisely. This combination makes them unpredictable and respected. Emotional control also reverses social expectations. Most people expect reaction. They expect justification. They expect emotional feedback. When it doesn't come, they feel exposed. Now they are the ones talking more, explaining more, justifying more. The frame shifts. There is also a biological component. Controlled breathing, steady posture, relaxed facial muscles. These signals communicate confidence to others before a single word is spoken. Your body broadcasts dominance or submission faster than language. People often mistake kindness for weakness. But kindness with emotional control is strength. You can be polite without being permissive, calm without being passive, silent without being submissive. That distinction separates leaders from followers. Emotionally uncontrolled individuals are easy to predict. Trigger them, and they respond. Push them, and they escalate. Ignore them, and they collapse. Predictability is exploitable. Control destroys predictability. In competitive environments, emotional control is a weapon. Negotiations, conflicts, leadership, relationships. The one who maintains composure forces the other side to reveal urgency, desperation, or aggression. Those revelations weaken their position. Most people give away power unintentionally. They react to disrespect instead of ignoring it. They argue instead of observing. They explain instead of deciding. Each reaction lowers their perceived authority. Emotional control does not make you distant. It makes you respected. People may not always feel comfortable around emotionally disciplined individuals, but they always take them seriously. Comfort attracts. Respect governs. Over time, something changes. People stop testing boundaries. They stop provoking. They stop pushing. Not because you fought back, but because you never gave them what they wanted, a reaction. At its core, emotional control is self-ownership. You decide what matters, what doesn't, what gets energy, what gets silence. That autonomy is dominance. The final truth is simple but uncomfortable. If someone can control your emotions, they control you. If no one can control your emotions, no one controls you. And the person who cannot be controlled becomes the dominant force in the room. Ignoring is powerful, but ignoring without strategy is dangerous. Most people either react emotionally or disappear completely. Both positions lose leverage. True power sits in the middle. Strategic ignoring is not absence. It is controlled presence. And this is where most people fail. The mistake people make is thinking silence alone creates dominance. It doesn't. Timing, intent, and context decide whether ignoring raises your value or destroys it. The same silence can look like confidence or insecurity. The difference is strategy. Strategic ignoring starts with one rule. You don't ignore to escape. You ignore to reshape the dynamic. That means you are fully aware, fully conscious, fully in control. Silence is your move, not your reaction. Ask yourself this question. Are you ignoring because you feel powerless, or because you know you don't need to engage? The answer determines whether silence works for you or against you. Psychologically, people read intent faster than words. If your silence feels emotional, people sense weakness. If your silence feels deliberate, people sense authority. Authority doesn't rush. Authority doesn't explain. Authority doesn't explain. Authority doesn't overcorrect. Strategic ignoring works because it disrupts expectation. Most people expect instant replies, emotional feedback, justification, access. When expectations are broken calmly, the brain pauses, and in that pause, power shifts. Here's something important most people never realize. Ignoring is not about cutting people off. It's about cutting patterns off. You are not rejecting the person. You are rejecting disrespect, entitlement, manipulation, low-effort behavior. That distinction matters. Strategic ignoring is selective. You don't go silent everywhere. You don't disappear from everyone. You don't become cold universally. You withdraw attention only where value is being drained. That selectivity makes your silence noticeable. And noticeable silence creates mystery. Mystery is psychological leverage. When people don't know what you're thinking, where they stand, what comes next, their mind fills the gap. And here's the key. People invest more energy trying to understand silence than they ever do responding to words. Ask yourself another question. Why do people obsess more over those who say less? Because silence forces imagination. And imagination is more powerful than information. Strategic ignoring also protects your long-term position. Immediate reactions feel satisfying. They release emotion, but they cost authority. Silence delays gratification, and delayed gratification always wins in power dynamics. There is also a rhythm to effective ignoring. You don't vanish forever. You don't stay silent indefinitely. You reappear on your terms. That teaches people a psychological lesson. Access to you is conditional, and conditional access increases respect. Notice how high-level individuals operate. They are not unreachable. They are unpredictable. Sometimes present, sometimes absent, always composed. That inconsistency is not chaos. It's control. Strategic ignoring is also about what you don't ignore. You don't ignore direct responsibility, real consequences, situations that require leadership. You ignore provocation, validation seeking, emotional manipulation, power games. Knowing the difference is intelligence. Most people ignore out of ego. That backfires. Ego-driven silence wants to punish. Strategic silence wants to observe. Observation gives you information. Information gives you options. Options give you power. When you ignore strategically, something interesting happens. People start adjusting before you say anything. They change tone, increase effort, become cautious, seek clarity, not because you demanded it, but because your silence demanded respect. Now here's where curiosity and mystery matter most. You never explain why you went silent. The moment you explain, mystery dies. Let them wonder. Was it intentional? Did they misstep? Are they being evaluated? Did they lose status? Questions keep the mind engaged. Answers close loops. Power lives in open loops. Ask yourself this: what makes people remember you more? Your words or your absence? And another question: if your silence didn't matter, why would it bother them? Strategic ignoring also prevents emotional exhaustion. Constant engagement drains energy. Energy loss reduces clarity. Reduced clarity leads to bad decisions. Silence preserves focus. And focused individuals always dominate distracted ones. Another critical point: strategic ignoring is temporary. Disrespect is permanent. If behavior doesn't improve after silence, that silence becomes information. Information tells you this dynamic is not worth re-entering. Walking away after observing is power. Walking away emotionally is not. People fear ignoring because they fear losing connection. But ask yourself honestly, if someone only stays when you overgive, is that connection real, or is it convenience? Strategic ignoring answers that question without confrontation. There is also a reputational effect. When people know you don't react impulsively, they choose words carefully around you. They don't test, they don't provoke, they don't cross lines casually. Because they don't know how you'll respond, and uncertainty creates caution. Over time, strategic ignoring trains others how to treat you, not through rules, not through speeches, through consequence. Attention is the consequence. Silence is the correction. And here's the final psychological truth: the goal of ignoring is not control over others, it is control over yourself. Once you control your reactions, others lose control over you. That's dominance. Now think about this before the next interaction. What if saying nothing gives you more power than saying everything? What if silence is not the end of the conversation, but the beginning of leverage? And what happens when people realize they can't read you anymore? This is where the real game begins, because the person who cannot be rushed, cannot be provoked, cannot be emotionally pulled, always decides the outcome. If this part made you think differently, if you felt a shift in perspective, with poured, like this video, drash, share it with someone who reacts too much, drash, and follow for more psychology and power dynamics, because this was not the end. The next part goes deeper, and once you see it, you won't unsee it.